So we mentioned in passing these two divisions within Buddhism, right? Theravada, Mahayana, they're these schools of thought. In one of the documentaries that you watch, it mentions that there were a bunch of kind of offshoots, but these were kind of the two that have remained. However, there's a third that is prevalent. Sometimes it gets grouped in with Mahayana, but it's Vajrayana. It's the diamond vehicle, and we'll talk about that momentarily, what we mean about that. But these are the statistics, basically these major branches within Buddhism, and we'll find that there's diversity within each branch. So it's not like just one thing. You could almost look at it like maybe a Roman Catholic and Protestant. If you start looking at Protestant, you have tremendous amounts of diversity, right? There's this kind of agreement on a couple of things that separate it off from Catholicism, but there's a tremendous amount of diversity within. So that's something to keep in mind. So these are the three main kind of divisions. And what these have to do with is there's a second council, like there was that early council of the Buddha's followers that kind of codifying what are the things that he said that we remember. The second council, there's some disagreements about how we should adhere to early teachings versus some change. The one group advocates change, while the Theravada wants to follow what they say is the tradition of the elders. That's what the Theravada has to do with. The groups that are against them, that want to see this change, refer to Mahayana as the Hinayana, the small vehicle. Mahayana means the great vehicle, and Vajrayana means the diamond vehicle. But within followers of Theravada, they don't call it Hinayana. It's more of an insult. But the problem for those who want to bring about the change is that we're not supposed to be rooted in any kind of sort of caste system, but it seems almost like that really only a monk could reach enlightenment in the Theravada system. How could anyone else do it? So does that kind of recreate a sort of caste division? You know, you're born to the place where you have the opportunity to become a monk, or you're not born to that place. It's not exactly the caste, like you're born a Brahmin or a Dalit or anything like that, but in some sense, your rebirth puts you in a position to be able to pursue enlightenment or not, because not everybody can become a monk, and it would seem from the kind of strictness within Theravada that you might be born to a place where you can't. And one of the core elements of the Buddha's teachings is that anyone can achieve nirvana. So that's the big divide. You have in the 3rd century Indian ruler Ashoka, who converts to Buddhism, and this is partly responsible for the spread of Buddhism. And his children travel as missionaries to Sri Lanka. They convert its king and people. So why Sri Lanka is a kind of a central location for the Theravada Buddhism is it's one of the early converted lands. The 4th Buddhist council, about 100 years, 1st century BC, you have many things written down in Pali. There are these what's called the 3 baskets: the monastic rules, the words of the Buddha, and the higher teachings for monks. If you remember when we talked about life standards, there's the 5 precepts, but then monks have other standards. The Sri Lankan monks preserved this tradition during a revival of Hinduism, when India early on had kind of a Buddhist expansion, but then there's this revival of Hinduism, and then and also the Muslims move into India. So Sri Lanka is where this kind of early Buddhism is maintained. what is it that's central to Theravada? It's the Arhat. If you want to understand it, the Arhat is the one who is worthy or perfected, the one who has attained nirvana. Well, what do we mean by that? Well, this is the point of major distinction between Theravada and Mahayana. Right? If we look at it, Theravada is the idea that you must be emancipated through your own self-effort. There's no supernatural aid, and the virtue is wisdom. This is the virtue of the Arhat, that ideal. The Arhat is the one who remains in nirvana after death. It requires constant commitment, and is really usually only primarily monks or nuns who reach this goal. Anyone who achieves this, any Arhat, is a Buddha or a saint. They're a teacher. Their writings are important. They can inspire, but they're not going to help you in any other way now. Not in any way like a mediator. They've left what they've left in their teachings and the stories of their life, and that's it. There's a minimization of kind of the metaphysical teachings within this. And there's not a lot of kind of religious ritual. There is some that seems religious, but the centers on meditation, right? But in Mahayana, the great vehicle, the big vehicle, right, the large vehicle, there's human aspirations are supported by divine powers and the grace they bestow. So there's this idea of mediators. Because the key virtue is compassion. The Buddha wanted it so that anyone could achieve nirvana. And so there must be some way for the average person to do that, but how could they do that with such strict guidelines? Well, this opens the door for lay people to have greater participation. And their ideal is the Bodhisattva. This is the Buddha, the person who's achieved awakening, who's achieved nirvana, and yet remains somehow available as a mediator, as a savior. And there's much more elaborate metaphysical teachings, much more emphasis on ritual, and there is prayer. You can pray to the chosen Buddha, whichever Bodhisattva is kind of your. They take on almost a godlike role. So these are those two major schools, and these are the major differences. And if you remember the Bodhisattva ideal and what the Bodhisattva is one who has achieved nirvana but is very compassionate, that key virtue, and helps others so that the layperson, through various rituals and prayers, can also achieve nirvana, versus the Arhat being the ideal of Theravada, who has achieved nirvana. They're not coming back. They can't help you. The only help they offer is that they're an inspiration, they're an example, they left their teachings. And the key virtue is wisdom, and what's required is that your own self-effort emancipates you. So that's the difference. So that Bodhisattva, right, is the one who is worthy of attaining nirvana, but delays doing so out of compassion for others. If you can remember those two distinctives, you can, between the Arhat and the Bodhisattva, you can begin to see, and you see that the big distinctions in those two figures, those key ideal figures. Mahayana spreads into China and Japan. It expands the Sangha, the kind of community, to include more lay people, and it adapts well to indigenous religions. If you've ever read The Good Earth, it's a novel about China, 19th century, early 20th century, and you see these Chinese people who worship ancestors and have respect for the teachings of, there's this whole structure rooted in Confucianism, and yet they also have like symbols of the Buddha that they revere and pray to for help. So there's this blending that happens with indigenous faiths. This is also why Mahayana, the Tibetan Buddhism is often grouped within Mahayana, though it is different, the Vajrayana. So Chinese and Japanese groups, Chan Buddhism was brought to China by the Bodhidharma, 520 AD. This is Zen in Japan. That's what Chan becomes in Japan. There are these silent transmission of teachings about enlightenment. focus on the Buddha mind through meditation and emptiness. Two key features. The koan is like the Zen riddle used to reach non-rational enlightenment. A riddle is a kind of a misnomer, right? Because a riddle you should be able to figure out logically, but koans are not about your discursive reasoning. They're about apprehension of something beyond rationality. There's a koan that's like this person says you put a goose into a large bottle with a small opening, and as a baby, and you feed it and give it water through the opening, and it grows and grows and grows until it fills the bottle, but it can't get out the neck. How do you get it out without breaking the bottle? And then the response is, it's out. There are various explanations of that. That the bottle is an illusion, other things, but that's how a koan works. It's not this discursive reasoning. It's something, an apprehension of some reality beyond the rational. Zazen is the practice of prolonged seated meditation. Is very important to Zen Buddhism. So that is probably what we're more familiar with because of. I think, the Star Wars, the Jedi Order is kind of rooted in a sort of Renzai Zen. So Zen is the one we're probably most familiar with. Zen made its way into the American West early on, and then it comes back more popularly, as we saw in that other lecture about the history and the spread. Begins to spread through movies, and it becomes popular. There are various forms of Zen too. We're talking about Mahayana. There are various kind of different approaches underneath the great vehicle. Zen is one of them. Within Zen there are different schools. There's Renzai and there are others. So it's important to keep that in mind. So it's adopted in Japan. Zen is. Renzai and Soto. Renzai is very strict. It's a warrior samurai version. Soto is very like the opposite. Like, you're already enlightened if you just knew it, type thing. So there can be an intolerance of other forms of Buddhism. One example of that is the Nichiren school, which is highly popular in Japan. So we have these various and different sects of Zen that is one of many different expressions of the Mahayana, the great vehicle. This is kind of the typical Zen response, right? Someone asked the Zen master, how do you practice Zen? The master said, when you're hungry, eat. When you're tired, sleep. And the person says, isn't that what everyone does anyway? And the master replied, no, most people entertain 1,000 desires when they eat and scheme over 1,000 plans when they sleep. Remember that you're seeking to move beyond desire in order to rid yourself of these desires so that you can rid yourself of suffering. Another form of Mahayana Buddhism, not connected to Zen at all, or this is not a subset of Zen, this is just something totally different, is Pure Land. And Pure Land Buddhism has this idea of this bodhisattva who has ascended to the Pure Land. He's created this Pure Land, and most people just aren't capable of reaching nirvana because of the hardships of life. But if you follow this bodhisattva, this kind of Buddhist savior, he will, if you honor him, he'll take you into the Pure Land, and then from the Pure Land you will be able to achieve nirvana by your own efforts from that place. So this is another form of the kind of great vehicle, the Mahayana. I said that Vajrayana sometimes is included within Mahayana. It's related because it is this great vehicle. There are definitely bodhisattvas, not necessarily under that name. This is the diamond vehicle. This is Tibetan Buddhism. Around 700 AD, this Rinpoche is said to have subdued the demons of Tibet and made them protectors of Tibetan Buddhism. So there's this blending with the native Bon religion because of these spirits, these demons, right? And it's developed into various schools. The Dalai Lama, who is the ocean of wisdom, is considered the head of the Gelug school of Tibetan Buddhism, and the ruler of Tibet. The Dalai Lama is believed to be this one person, this one bodhisattva who is reincarnated again and again and again, right? So you have divinities and demons, as we mentioned. You have this Dalai Lama who reincarnates over and over. He's this single Buddha. You have prayer wheels and flags and mandalas and oracles, and odd, very different types of Buddhist scriptures from the others. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is almost this otherworldly journey into a sort of hell. So the current Dalai Lama is Tenzin Gyatso. He's the 14th Dalai Lama. He's believed to be a reincarnation of the 13th. He fled to India, and he regularly meets with world leaders to kind of ask for help for Tibet. But he is to be the ruler of Tibet. That's the Tibetan Buddhism is at the heart of Tibetan culture. It is embraced in Tibetan religion and encompassed it along with Buddhism. It is, you'll see a documentary about a Tibetan Buddhist monk who is considered to be a reincarnation of another Buddha, another Lama. But they search through their scriptures. They're looking for teachings, and it's rather different than Zen. And we'll see that. We'll read a Zen article, and we'll watch this Tibetan monk. But these are all connected to this kind of large vehicle idea that there are bodhisattvas, there's mediators who will help others reach nirvana.